Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Steelers Draft Talk. I'm your host, Derek Bell. With me is my good buddy, Nick Martin. Today, we are going to be talking about the defensive side of the ball for Senior Bowl week, going over some prospects that we're really looking forward to seeing. Still a couple weeks out, but just to get some names on your all's radar before we get there. As a reminder, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/allsteelerstalk. And obviously, you can find us wherever you get your podcast. You like the video, drop a like. You want us to talk about a specific prospect, make sure you drop that in the comments as well, or hit us up on Twitter. Either or is good. We always want to try to get y'all as included into the show as we can. So, first off, how we doing, Nick? How we doing, brother?
Doing good, man. Doing good. It's the draft grind. It's moving along. Starting to get to some reports, and can't wait to start rolling those out on the site. Definitely be on the lookout for a few from me this week. So, yep, I'm really looking forward to it, honestly.
Heck yeah, man. I'm trying to do the same this week. A little hectic for me, but just still trying to push some stuff out. Some guys that I watched this week were really fun watches. So it is nice. Like, in January, there's still, a newness to the process. We're not kind of in the grind process of it yet, or the grind period. My focus over the last couple of weeks has been probably the last 10 days or so has been more so on the Senior Bowl guys, just so I can get some level of familiarity with most of the players before we head into that week. That way, there are no surprises or anything like that. So,
yeah.
All right, let's get this kicked off, man. Where you want to start? We want to start with defensive linemen.
Yeah. Let's start there.
All right, let's start with some defensive linemen. Who are you looking forward to seeing down in Mobile?
Zach Pickens. I think he is one of the most standout in terms of like his position versatility. You could see him play from like a 0 alignment to anywhere from like a 5 technique and 2 gap. He mostly attacked at South Carolina because they tended to 1 gap on their defense more. But his length, his power really stands out. Surprising amount of bend for a guy that big. Javon Kinlaw really talked him up back in the process, saying he can be like an amazing player. Overall, with me, I just want to see him maintain his pad level a little better. When he gets that initial push, you can see him like maintain the point of attack, but he gets a little high and then he ends up getting finished towards like the end. So I want to see him be able to maintain that pad level. Maybe use a little more of a one arm to try and maintain the point of attack, because a lot of times he doesn't really get his eyes on the ball carrier, so he ends up missing a few. I watched a little bit of his game against Kentucky. He ended up missing a tackle on Chris Rodriguez as he got like the push in the backfield, and he ended up getting like planted afterwards. But like there's a lot of traits that really stand out, and as a guy for the Steelers, honestly, around that second round range, Pickens is a guy who can really give you that hybrid versatility that you love to see with their defensive line and how they like to move their guys around. So he's definitely a guy I'm going to be paying very close attention to.
Yeah, he's a former 5-star coming out of high school, right? Like he was a really big recruit for South Carolina back in the day.
He was the number 1 defensive tackle in his recruiting class, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I haven't got around to finishing, my thoughts on him, but just watching him live, I think the length, he's a good athlete, but the length really stands out. And I think block deconstruction is a plus with him. He's able to get off blocks, penetrate up in the backfield. So that's definitely a plus for him. Who else you watching for that position?
DJ Dale. Watched Ricky Stromberg a while back and was trying to pay mostly attention to the centers, but Dale was someone who just stood out instantly. He just is such a technically sound run defender who maintains the line of scrimmage. Just outstanding technique, very rarely caught out of position, was considered a big glue guy along that defense, and I'm not surprised because he just kind of keeps that run defense afloat. Commands doubles, but really just low pad level and finds the ball carrier consistently. Really impressed with him overall. I think he's gonna be one of those guys that you really prioritize in like the late day 2 to early day 3 area, because I do think he's a little limited in what he can offer as a pass rusher. He's a fluid guy, but he's not a natural pass rusher, is how I would describe him. he's more of that guy who creates that push. And you can play him on third down. You just might not get as much as you typically want from him. But Dale, guy who really stands out in terms of character, in terms of being a leader on that defense, and just very technically sound. I liked a lot of what I saw from him.
Yeah, he's a shorter guy too, so I mean he has that natural leverage to him, and like you said, kind of just a glue guy. I personally kind of got 2 down vibes from him, just at least right now. But interested to see how he does. I mean, Mobile's a good place to show off, some improved pass rushing traits. So,
Sure.
for the defensive line stuff, just from guys that I'm looking forward to seeing, Siaki Ika. For Baylor, former LSU guy, he's been around a long time, and he's been a name that the draft community has been really familiar with for several years now because he broke out. He was a contributor on those LSU teams way back in the day. But 6'4", 350-pound nose tackle. I mean, the ideal throwback type of size that you look for in a zero tech. And not just a plodding guy, who just kind of wins with, his overall mass. Like, he's got pretty surprising athleticism for a guy his size. I do think there's some pass rush upside too. So like maybe, maybe there is some three down versatility for him early on in his career. Want to see more of a pass rushing repertoire, like more consistency, stringing together moves. I'm also interested to see what his 2022 tape looks like. I watched Baylor a little bit live this year, but not nearly as much as I did last year. But I know that he had a down year statistically. So I'm interested to see like what contributed to that. As a junior, I was kind of surprised that he didn't come out because he really broke out as a pass rusher as a junior, putting together some of those athletic traits. I think he finished the season with like 6 sacks, but I know this year he only had 1 sack and his pressure rate was down too. So I'm interested to see what the deal was there this year, but Mobile definitely a place where he could make some money. And then just another guy that I've kind of recently been trying to get more exposure to has been Keanu Benton. 6'4", 315 pounds. Another guy who can play, kind of at that nose tackle, zero tech position. The thing with Benton that really stands out is he just has awesome length to control blockers and maintain gap integrity against the run. I really like just how he can get underneath blockers' pads and kind of guide them wherever he needs them to go. So he took a little bit of a leap this year as a pass rusher. He's never been known as a pass rusher. Mainly some of that is due to the fact that he's a little bit limited of an athlete. But I do think that he carries some, late day 2, early day 3 value. And again, these one-on-ones and those pass rush settings down in Mobile could, prove pretty fruitful for him to hopefully improve some of his draft stock.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely the pass rush aspect stood out with me when I got to a little bit of his film. I didn't notice it much as a run defender early on when I was going through, but I probably had some bad games overall that I was going through in that department. But in terms of his pass rush, it was kind of surprising to see a guy who was getting that much pressure overall, even though he wasn't considered that type of guy. Definitely someone I'm going to be looking forward to watching. But speaking of pass rush one-on-ones, there's an edge rusher I am very, very excited to see down in Mobile, and that is Derek Hall. Derek Hall is a twitched up, like just lengthy
tank.
Yes, absolute tank. Lengthy, explosive pass rusher. He thrives from a 2-point stance. Like whenever he rushed from a wide 9 alignment, that guy converted speed to power just about every single time. That he just has that ability to really shock you on contact. Just violent hands at the point of attack. Flashes some surprisingly good bendability. He reduces his surface area pretty well under the tackle, but I do think he needs to finish a little more consistently with turning at the tight apex of the corner. I think with some better hand usage overall, that will help in that regard. But he's probably the most promising pass rusher in terms of traits that's going to be at the Senior Bowl. So I will have my eyes absolutely glued to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hall's a guy, just real quick on Hall, something that I wanted to bring up with him and Benton, just because it's a good segue. But so one of the things I forgot to mention with Benton is the intangible aspect. He's a team captain. He's considered like a leader within that locker room. Those intangible stuff, I don't feel like get enough kind of run when we're talking about draft prospects. Obviously, the tape is what we kind of focus on, the traits, the athletic ability. But those intangible aspects are really things that, teams are going to focus really heavily on once we get into the interview process, not just down in Mobile, but when we get to the combine. As a team captain, Derek Hall, also a team captain. So really high character marks there. So you brought up a lot of good points in terms of like his film, but there's a lot to like with Derek Hall. I agree. Who was your other guy?
The other guy was Isaiah McGuire. This was a little bit of a surprising watch for me. He's about listed around 6'4", like 270-ish or so.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me some Zadarius Smith vibes with his ability as a pass rusher. But what's surprising about him is he really relies on his cross chop to rip combo, and he ends up turning some corners. And I don't really end up. I'm kind of like surprised. Like he's able to flatten his path towards the quarterback whenever he softens the corner with his hands. I definitely don't think he's a pure bender, because I did see some reps against Broderick Jones where he tries to turn the edge and he just can't quite rip under him quite consistently. But another guy that his best reps came from like a 2-point stance. Like he surprising for his size, he just had a lot more good reps in terms of his ability from a standing alignment. He mostly played with his hand in the dirt, and he played a lot of 7, a lot of like 5, so he didn't have a lot of he was getting a lot of slower reads when coming off the ball, so he wouldn't be able to just tee off and rush the passer. But he has some good ability, and I had some fun watching him, especially against Broderick Jones in the regular season. I think he's a guy who can really stand out. I want to see how his length particularly stands out. I want to see him use some long arms in those one-on-ones. I want to see him win with that length, because I think he's gonna measure with some really long arms overall.
Yeah, I would agree. The length was something that stood out. The motor also with McGuire is another thing that
Yes.
I think he's got going for him too. And like you said, he can do some different things. I would like to see some more reps too, just from like a 3-4, like standing up alignment, just because I think that's probably where, it's definitely where some teams are going to view him in terms of projection to the next level. The edge class, man, awesome. I mean, Zach Harrison is really the guy that I'm looking forward to most. I think if you ask me to pick one guy who could potentially just skyrocket their draft hype, I think it's Zach Harrison. 6'6", 270 pounds. Really intriguing power profile. I mean, Harrison was a former 5-star recruit. Anytime Ohio State gets those 5-star recruits off the edge, you immediately think they're going to be a superstar because of how well they develop those pass rushers. We never really saw that consistent level of dominance with Harrison, but there has been flashes of that. And I think back to like just that Iowa game from this past season, he rushed the passer 8 times during that game. He had 5 pressures. I mean, he was just absolutely wrecking their offensive line. So he's a guy, really freaking good athlete. I think he's gonna test out of this world once we get to the combine. So when you're talking about potential risers, I mean, he's got the recruiting pedigree. He comes from Ohio State, where they've had a long lineage of developing those type of guys. He just might be a guy that's going to be a late bloomer. I'm not really sure, but I think he's definitely going to come off the board day 2 of the draft. But it wouldn't even surprise me if he ended up pushing himself into that like top 50, maybe even into the first round range, just once teams kind of start to fall in love with that athletic profile. Mobile will be big for him. This is the type of setting that, his traits and overall physical profile needs to dominate. And I think that he has the potential to do so. So another guy with Harrison that I'm looking forward to watching, kind of in a different mode, but is Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame, 6'5", 265 pounds. Has a pretty good get off from the line of scrimmage. He's a guy that I talked about a lot last year during the summer scouting process. I really like watching Foskey play. I love the length. A lot of his pass rush repertoire revolves around that length. He uses a lot of stabs, a lot of swipes. Production's been off the charts, just later in the season, this past year, he set the Notre Dame sack record. You think about all the good players that came through there. I think Justin Tuck was the guy who held the record before him. So seems like he's fallen off the radar a little bit. Maybe he didn't take the leap that we were kind of anticipating him taking as a senior. But I'm a big believer in his talent, high character marks. He's been, a good player for that Notre Dame program for a long time. So looking forward to seeing how he does in this setting and see if maybe he can kind of rejuvenate a little bit of his draft hype that he had in the summer.
Yeah, a lot of familiarity with Foskey, guy that we've been watching for a good while. And, sometimes what ends up happening with the draft community is it's kind of like the Toy Story meme where he throws away the toy that, and he's like, I don't want to play with you anymore. And, you might be seeing that a little bit with Foskey where like people have just been watching it for so long that they're more interested in those ultra twitched up pass rushers. And, Foskey might not be able to provide the bend that you want to see, but you love to see the pass rush repertoire and just his ability to utilize his length. I think those are huge traits overall that you want to see in a pass rusher.
Yeah, and he a big thing with pass rushers in general coming out of college is, a lot of guys they just don't really understand how they win, and Foskey
Exactly.
has a good understanding of how he wins. He uses his strengths to, suit him, and like he doesn't try to play beyond himself. But that being said, I really like the pass rush repertoire, and I think that this is a week where, maybe he needs to remind some people about, just the type of player he is. So, who we want to go to linebacker next?
Yes.
Let's go to linebacker. Who are you looking forward to seeing this week?
Guy that might end up being a my guy type of candidate for me is Dorian Williams from Tulane. That guy, I love linebackers who show zero hesitation, but I love guys who have that range sideline to sideline that are just not afraid to absolutely punch you in the mouth. Just that physicality and that play recognition, it just really stands out in that regard. Guy who has some really good instincts and coverage. Might not be that guy you trust to play man to man, on most of the time. Like rarely is anyone, gonna be are your linebackers gonna be trusted in that regard. But I just love the way he triggers downhill. I love his play recognition. I think he thrives in zone coverage. In a linebacker class that's kind of hard to love overall, Dorian Williams is that guy that like anytime I just watch, I just find myself really enthused about him. And that's a guy I'm really going to be looking forward to, especially in scrimmages. I think linebackers can really stand out in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
Past years, I really remember Fred Warner, who really stood out, and just how like constant, like he just triggered downhill and just he saw it coming. You want to see that ability to just play with that zero hesitation, and I think Dorian Williams is going to be that guy. Like he's someone I want everyone to watch.
Yeah, he's a guy that I haven't watched yet. So I mean, we were talking about before the show. We've talked about this over the past couple of weeks that the linebacker position is definitely one of the positions that we're probably least enthusiastic about, just from what we've seen so far and just projecting in terms of how these guys are going to be as pros. I'm not saying that like there aren't good players. It's just there's not nearly the depth or the level of excitement that I had last year in terms of the inside linebacker class. So just looking at some of the numbers from Dorian Williams, though, 54 stops last season at Tulane, according to Pro Football Focus. So yeah, the production was definitely there.
Yep, he could stick you, man. He could stick you. Another guy I'm really looking forward to seeing. We see it a lot with these HBCU colleges in the past few years. Is Aubry Miller Jr. from Jackson State. He's a Missouri transfer, and I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I've watched Jackson State film, because let's be real, it's hard to get your hands on some of that film right now. But I'm really curious to see where he ends up standing out, because he's a guy that, like, you watch some of the clips on him. He really triggers downhill, really can hit. I want to see if his range stands out. And with these HBCU guys, we've seen it in the past with the Senior Bowl. Darius Leonard really stood out like years ago, and he made himself a lot of money. I'm really curious to see if Aubry Miller Jr. is gonna do the same. And I'm not very familiar with the linebacker class overall, so I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to guys who need to make more out of this opportunity than anyone else, because you're not going to see them go up against the level of competition that you're going to see at the Senior Bowl. So you want to see that block deconstruction. You want to see guys who just show that zero hesitation. You know, Aubry Miller Jr., older guy, probably from what I saw on Rise and Draft database, he is listed at around almost 24 years old, so he's going to be an older guy in this class. Definitely someone I'm going to be paying close attention to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anytime you get like the HBCU guys or the smaller school guys, FCS, guys like that end up at this All-Star event, you want to see if they belong. And we talked about that a little bit when we talked about the offensive position last week. But this is a great opportunity for those guys who, like you said, don't really have the opportunity to go up against, other NFL draft caliber talent. So it's a good week to see how you measure up. As far as the linebacker position, I'm going to go with one of the more familiar names in the class, Henry To'oTo'o from Alabama, 6'2", 230 pounds. Former Tennessee guy who transferred to Bama, I think 2 years ago. He's been really productive over the course of his career, high-level communicator, plus football IQ, solid athlete as well. But, he's just a tackling machine, man. Like, he's always around the football. Like I said, I think he's a really smart player. I think he takes a lot of good angles. The biggest thing with To'oTo'o that I worry about is the tackles. Like the missed tackles on film are just maddening. I think some of that is due to the lack of size. He's he's definitely on the smaller side. He does appear to me to be lacking the necessary reach or length that you typically would look for in an inside linebacker. But again, that's what this week is for. I want to see how he handles, the block deconstruction, how he tackles in the live sessions, or even the game. Like, I want to see that as well. So this is the last kind of chance that we get to see these guys with contact. So I want to see, how he does in this type of setting. But, he's a player who's got a ton of experience. You look at just the amount of snaps that he's played in the SEC against other really good competition. Been a productive guy, so I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays over the course of the week. And then I don't watch a ton of Pitt, even though we do a Steelers podcast, the draft podcast. A lot of our stuff revolves around the Pittsburgh area, but I don't watch a ton of Pitt live. Every time I watch the Pitt defense this year, though, Siaki Dennis was standing out like crazy. I mean, he was just all over the field. Sort of surprised that he's not getting more buzz in a weak inside linebacker class. Kind of a similar size profile here, but I think Dennis is a really good tackler.
Yeah.
He has good stopping power, pretty good range. There are no tackling concerns there. Another smart football player. I think he's explosive, good eyes. Like, I don't see him, getting sucked up on like play action fakes or anything like that. So there's a lot to like with him, and we're just, like we said, we're looking for bodies at this position to get excited about. And I think that Dennis could be a guy that probably is getting. The last time I looked at his mock stuff was earlier this week when I was doing a little bit of research for the pod, and it seemed like he's getting mocked like mid-day 3, and I definitely think he has the potential, just from a physical trait standpoint, to potentially be a riser throughout the process.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Biggest thing I want to see with Siaki Dennis is actually what he ends up measuring in at overall, because I think he's going to be a shorter guy, like around 6 foot. But
Yeah,
you
listed at 6'2", but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I'm kind of curious to see if he's more in like the 230 range, or if he's like touching 220 on that regard. So that's a big thing we have to look forward to, is the measuring of everyone. And
one more thing with Dennis too. 11 sacks this past season. I mean, his ability as a blitzer to kind of come downhill and rush the passer is definitely an underrated thing. It gives you some more versatility with him. I think he's got like 19, 20 sacks over the course of his career as well. So there's some versatility he can do. He can do some different stuff for you. Like I said, I like him. In a class where we're kind of just looking for bodies. So let's go cornerback next, and then we'll wrap it up with the safety position.
Yep. All right. So a guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing is Jaborian Bennett. from Maryland. He is someone who really stood out to me at the end of the year in his bowl game against NC State. Had a just really like awesome job of fighting back on back shoulder throws. His last play of his career was an interception that sealed the game. It was just there were some traits that were really standing out. Feldman freak list guy. He reportedly, him and his teammate, wide receiver Raheem Jarrett, they apparently, go back and forth on who jumps the highest and stuff like that, and who runs the fastest. Reportedly, Bennett jumps about 42 inches in the vert, which is that's pretty absurd overall. And he ran like 20. He was like clocked at like 22.9 miles per hour on the GPS, which I'll be real, it's probably inflated overall because very rarely, even in the NFL, do you see a guy who's clocked at like 22 overall. But you like seeing that ability at corner. You want to see those guys who can stay in phase, but also just show that level of athleticism. Bennett, he's a thicker guy, and I like seeing corners who have that strength at the in coverage, because you don't like seeing guys get bullied around. Overall, the big thing I want to look forward to is just I have very little on this corner class right now in terms of all 22 film, and that's a big thing for me, is being able to see these guys from an alignment. I'm really looking forward to seeing Bennett overall at at the Senior Bowl. I think he's one of those guys, from what I've seen in limited clips, he has that ability to really stand out in man coverage. Another guy.
Yeah, for sure. He's a community college transfer, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. I haven't watched him yet, so he's definitely going to be somebody that I'm going to have to get to before the game.
Another guy, Riley Moss. It's always it's like seeing a unicorn when you see a white corner in the NFL draft, because it's just so rare. I think the last starting white corner in the league was Jason Sehorn for the Giants, and it's just very rare. But the thing about Riley Moss, he's another Bruce Feldman freak list guy, and he apparently has reportedly has the most obscene short shuttle I've ever seen, which is he's listed at like a 3.85, which is absolutely ridiculous for anyone. But seeing that short area agility, it really shows up on film, because I've seen a lot of we've known a lot about Riley Moss since last year, and we were surprised he didn't come out last year, especially because he had some really good film, really clicks and closes downhill. He plays more from like a shuffle alignment, so he doesn't play as much from a pedal, but he plays a lot of off man, a lot of zone, and I'm really curious to see if he stands out more in those man-to-man situations down in Mobile, because he's going to be playing more from on alignments, especially in those one-on-ones. Of course, one-on-ones, they're more favored towards the receiver side, with the abilities to run triple moves and stuff like that. But, we end up looking at that a little more. But Moss, a guy who can really mirror, a guy who can really jump, 42-inch vertical, explosive athlete. Some might try and move him to safety. If he doesn't really stand out in an on man-to-man situation, you might see a little bit of evidence in that regard. So we'll see how he ends up looking overall.
Yeah, for sure. He's had some big plays. I know he picked off Michael Penix. I think he picked sixed him last year when he was still with
Indiana.
I think there was a tip ball that ended up flying in his hands. But yeah, he's a really good athlete. And I'm glad you mentioned that with the one-on-one stuff, because I do want to express that I do think that this DB class is really good, that we're going to get to see at the Senior Bowl. Just please understand that, on these 3-step drop slants and stuff, if the receivers are taking 6 and 7 steps before they're breaking inside and they end up winning the route, that's not a win for the receiver. Please understand that there is a timing element to all of this that we need to keep in mind. So that does drive me crazy. We get to these all-star game circuits and you start to see receivers doing the and one mixtape freestyles where it's we're taking 8-9 step slants and stuff, and I'm like, this is not realistic. This never happens in the game. But
Braxton Miller tape is what we call that.
Yeah. But yeah, some guys can make it work, man. But that's just not how the game is played. When it's 11-on-11.
Yeah.
Guy that I'm gonna talk about is Devon Witherspoon. I just finished my scouting report up on him, so it'll be up on the site at some point this week if you're looking for like a more interested, deeper dive into his tape. But just some cliff notes, man. Aggressive, competitive, physical cover guy with man cover skills, plenty of experience, plenty of ball production. I love watching this dude play. I think he's a coach's dream. He flies to the football, just every single rep is 100 miles an hour. He's got that swag about him. He's a big time trash talker, very confident guy in his own abilities. Like I said, Illinois, 75% of their reps this season were in man coverage. It's like the highest percentage of man reps in the country. So, and he had a lot of reps too, where they're playing, single high. And, out there on the boundary, man, when you're playing single high and having to defend guys going vertical without that safety help over the top, it's kind of it's pretty difficult task. So I think that, he's got first round tape, in my opinion, just like his ability to play the ball at the catch point. Very good change of direction skills, short area burst. The only thing with Witherspoon that is like really a concern, there's some technical stuff at the line of scrimmage that he needs to clean up. The biggest thing is the size. He's going to come in under 6 foot. He's only going to be about 180 pounds soaking wet. I'm not even sure if he's that. You don't see boundary corners in the NFL at that frame. And then just the long speed. He doesn't have the, whenever you see him make some technical mistakes at the line of scrimmage, a false step here or there, he doesn't have the recovery speed to kind of get back in phase. And that's going to be somewhat of a problem. Where I find solace in that is his slot corner reps over the course of this season. He played there more at Illinois. They asked him to shadow number one receivers, even into the slot, which I think is an underrated ability. Witherspoon is 100% day one ready slot corner. Like, you talk about some of the things that like Mike Hilton can do in terms of like defending the run, closing, good play recognition skills, willing to get his face mask dirty. He does all of those things. So there's a high floor there, even if he doesn't pan out on the outside. But I'd give him the chance to. I mean, I think he's competitive enough. He's got the tape that says he can do it. So he's a guy that, I've really enjoyed watching. I do think that there may be some of I think he's gotten a lot of hype recently. Heading into the last month or two of the season.
He was mocked to Pittsburgh at 17 and Dane Brugler's mock recently.
I saw that. I do think that is realistic. Like I said, the tape is 100% there. I just know how the cornerback position is. It's a stopwatch position. Yep. And I think when he gets to the combine, he is going to have to run a like 4.5 40. I think he can do that. I worry. Like, he ends up testing like 4.55, 4.57. You're going to see him fall back into day two, and that's what's going to happen. So
I think there might be some similarities with Asante Samuel Jr. in that regard, where the tape is there, but maybe the testing not so much.
Yeah, and I loved Asante Samuel Jr. coming out too. Like, I think that just the footwork aspect of ASJ was off the charts for me, and I think that Witherspoon, the way he can click and close, man, short area bursts, the change of direction, it's all there. He does a good job keeping his feet underneath him in his transition. So he's a guy that I'm really excited about. And then just another guy kind of on the different side of the spectrum is Rajon Wright. This is a guy that I wasn't familiar with at all, but 6'2", 200 pounds. When I was watching Jordan Addison a couple weeks ago, when I was following his scouting report for the site, he really stood out. Like, not only was he competing with Addison, he won a good amount of reps in that game. Really comfortable playing in press coverage. He'll mix in some off coverage techniques, cover skills, man, like a lot of length, good ball skills. He uses that size to his advantage. And I think that he fits that profile. Like, if you're looking for like a cover 3 type corner who can get up, disrupt receivers at the line of scrimmage, reroute guys, carry them vertically, squeezing them to the sideline. I don't know what his long speed is necessarily going to look like. I don't think that that's necessarily a strength. But just a guy physically imposing kind of corner who plays with a lot of confidence in himself. So I like some of the technical stuff he did in press coverage at the line of scrimmage. So I'm excited to see him.
I haven't watched him, but would you say he has some similarities to Martin Emerson Jr. from last year?
I thought Emerson was a little bit. What I really liked about Emerson was I thought he was pretty fluid.
Yeah.
in terms of like flipping his hips. And I think the one concern that I had with Emerson was I didn't think he found the ball all the time. And I think that Wright, from what I saw, did that better, but maybe not as fluid.
Hmm.
But certainly a guy who could potentially, I mean, Emerson had a lot of fans in the draft community. He was somebody that I didn't get on until late during last cycle. He's had a heck of a rookie season for
Yep.
Cleveland. I mean, there are legitimate people on my timeline, smart football people, that think that, he was he's probably their most consistent corner for the Browns over the course of the season. And Denzel Ward, great player. Greg Newsome, really good player. So yeah, I do think that he can contribute early on next season. I think he's going to be a riser through the process. These one-on-ones, a great opportunity for him to kind of show what he can do.
Yep.
Let's finish it off with the safety position. It's a good group right here.
Yep. Yeah, I like this one. Jamie Robinson, who's from Florida State. I think pretty much everyone has said this, but you get a lot of Jalen Petrie vibes from him in terms of
Mm-hmm.
just one of those safeties who can play in the nickel slot looks. He's like surprisingly good in the pass rush department as a blitzer. Like he's aggressive downhill has sound run fits. I think he's really going to stand out in those scrimmages, just being able to just like stand out in like the run department and just being able to click and close downhill. I'm kind of curious to see how he looks in one-on-ones overall because he plays really well from some zone, but I need to see him a little more in some on man looks versus some of these receivers. I'm really curious to see how he will stand out in that regard.
Yeah, I haven't got the chance to watch him, so he's a guy that's definitely on my short list. You got anybody else safety wise?
Yeah, I got one more.
Hit me.
Jordan, yeah, Jordan Battle from Alabama, probably
Yeah.
the one guy people aren't talking about enough, which is kind of crazy because you know when people talk about like the top of the position group, those guys constantly get mentioned. I feel like Battle very rarely gets as much buzz as he should. He's extremely sound against the run. Like I constantly see him in the right position with the right fit. But what really stands out to me, you are not going to get yards after contact versus him. He absolutely brings his hips and he will absolutely just shock you backwards when on those tackles. Like just awesome thump on contact. Like just very rarely will you see guys get that extra yak versus him. Really clicks and closes downhill. Personally, I like him more in the box from what I've seen, but I want to see him more from those deeper alignments. Overall, because I'm lacking the all 22, but like the thing with Battle is like he was asked to play a lot of different spots, and him, Branch, and I believe another guy who's going to be at the Senior Bowl was DeMarco Helms. They
Mm-hmm.
tended to rotate a lot of these defensive backs and play them in different spots. There was a lot of like position versatility with those three. So you saw them play from a lot of different alignments. Battle overall, though, like where he stood out to me was just his ability to absolutely destroy you in the run game in terms of his fits, his explosion downhill, and just his thump on contact.
Yeah, obviously Bama's the team that I watch religiously. So I think Battle, like playing in that robber role, kind of as that underneath defender, kind of hold defender in the middle of
Yeah.
the field. That was where he kept sticking out to me when I was watching them over the course of the season. Like you said, both the Bama safeties, Helms and Battle, are both going to be at the Senior Bowl. Branch, he's not. I don't think he was even Senior Bowl eligible.
No.
But Brian Branch, I'll just go ahead and put a flag on that because that is one of my guys. I love me some Brian Branch. I think he's a top 15-ish prospect in this class, bar none. And I wouldn't be surprised if he came in higher than that for me.
Yeah.
Safety position, it's a good class, man. I think Chris Smith, you talk about safeties with a lot of pedigree, 5'11", 190 pounds, a real vocal communicator, a big steadying force for a Georgia defense that's won back-to-back titles. Primary lines up at free safety, playing back from depth. He can play, center field, play some two high shell stuff. Versatile guy, though. He can play in the box. He's got some slot reps that I really like. The thing that sticks out for me,
as well.
yeah, special teams too. Like you talk about, added value. I want to say that I think it was him that had like 7 special teams tackles in one of the years that I was looking at last night or the night before. I should have put that in my notes, but I
Yeah, a lot of
love
fun.
the way that this dude fills the alley from depth in the run game. I
Yeah.
mean, he had a rep against Oregon that I tweeted out last night where he comes from freaking 20 yards in the middle of the field, and they toss it to the running back in the backfield, and he just flies up, takes a great angle, stopping power, knocks this dude backwards. Just a phenomenal play from a guy. He's not the type of athlete that I think goes typically in round one of the draft at the safety position, but he's a 100%. If I'm in the market for a safety on day two, I want this dude on my team. Like I think he's going to be a successful NFL player and a contributor on a good defense. Other guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing is JL Skinner from Boise. Skinner is a build a safety, pure height, weight, speed guy, 6'4", 210 pounds. This dude plays with bad intentions. I mean, he's just a flat out hitter, man. If you're a receiver and you are planning on crossing the middle of the field with him in that vicinity, you better watch your head because he is gonna knock your head off. It's a treat to watch him play. He's a physical type of dude who offers some pretty good zone coverage skills from what I saw over the summer. I'm really interested to see how his game transformed over the course of his final year. I think he could be a little bit stiff. That was something that I remember in the summer scouting period. I want to see how he does in man coverage because I think that how he does in man coverage in the slot will probably determine what his role is going to be at the next level. I think he could definitely hang with tight ends. Yeah. I just want to see if he can do it against some of those slot profile receivers.
If you see that, especially, we had higher opinions of this guy last year with Kyle Hamilton, but you want to see that ability to just flip your hips very smoothly so you can handle those slot guys. Because if you're able to play down in the box and be able to cover those shiftier receivers while being able to erase those tight ends, yeah, exactly. Like those are the Terrell Edmonds, the Kyle Duggars of the world that just they really stand out in that area.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, safety versatility, those guys that don't have to come off the field and you can kind of plug and play them depending on, positional formations that you get from opposing offenses. Those are guys that you can really mold your game plan around because guys that can cover different body types and different skill sets are insanely valuable at the NFL because it's all about matchups. The NFL is a matchup league. If you have a guy that really can take away a lot of different body types, it gives you the advantage as a defensive coordinator. So Skinner's a guy that I'm definitely looking forward to seeing. I think that about wraps it up. We're not going to get into the long snappers. I think we covered everything else over the course of the last two episodes. But once again, just speaking for Nick and myself, really appreciate the support on the show, support on the channel. You like the show, make sure you drop a like, drop a comment if y'all want to hear us talk about anybody specific as we move forward. Here in the next couple of weeks, we're hoping to get into maybe some positional specific episodes where we're going to go over like the top players of each position. We're going to try to hammer out some details on, where we're going to go with the direction of this as we get closer into, Senior Bowl week, as we head towards the combine through the draft process. But again, thank you guys. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/allsteelerstalk, or wherever you get your podcast from. We will check you guys next week. Y'all have a good one.
Peace.